So everybody, welcome into this presentation. Some of y'all may have seen this screen, maybe not. This is our five-star virtual engagement plan, especially doing five-star virtual engagement for diverse audiences. So for me, this is one of my favorite presentations. We don't get to do it that often because most of our work is helping organizations put out fires that come with a lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this is one of the presentations where I get to have a little bit more fun and really help folks like yourself, coaches, presenters, facilitators, really do some magical work even in the virtual world, because we know Zoom burnout or Zoom fatigue is real. At the same time, I don't know if you've been on a presentation lately that you are super compelled, or I guess put that in the chat, put the word compelled. If you've ever been in a presentation, let's say over the last 90 days that you're like, oh, I'm super glad I was here, or they kept on going and I wanted to stay. Just go ahead and put the word compelled if you've had that kind of experience. And if you haven't, it's okay. Ideally, we help you create some more of those experiences. So your feedback either way helps to move this conversation forward. So as we're doing this, I want to highlight that our focus is to really work through five-star virtual engagement techniques that you can use to create an extraordinary online presentation that includes meetings or events that help to build connection and get you the results. And the bottom part is key, regardless of your content or technical abilities. Right, so we will cover a little bit of technical pieces on here, but this training ideally is helping teach you some of the principles that I bring both in person and online. I've been a speaker for over 15 years now, so it's been amazing to work with elementary all the way up to the elderly. So when I talk to you about creating engagement, it's really looking at the principles that can be applied across ages, across different demographics. And last year for me, or 2019. I was getting a chance to live my dream. I did 150 days on the road, being able to speak, being able to train, being able to educate people in different formats. And so for 2020, I was super excited. I was actually already on schedule to double my income and double my impact. So I was fired up. And then many of y'all saw, like I did, if you had in-person events, I just kept getting email after email saying postpone and cancellation, postpone, cancellation. And I was sitting in this very office. I did not have this set up. But I remember sitting right here, right in front of my computer, and like in tears. Because it felt like the dream that I've been working on for 15 years was just getting crushed. And I remember talking to one of my mentors, Dan Bland, and as we were going through this conversation, he said, Kemy, the most important thing to understand right now is that your dream is delayed but not denied. The dream is delayed but not denied. And that was kind of the little pep talk I needed to say, okay, how do I bring myself online? Notice how I said, how do I bring myself online? We're not about going online. I think when some people say, hey, I want to go online, they start using a high-pitched voice and they start speaking differently and acting big. It's like, blah, blah, blah. How do you bring yourself online? That's what our focus is on. And even Matt said it, I'm going to show you some camera magic. I don't call it trickery. I'm not here to trick you. I want to show you some magic, but you don't need all this to be able to bring yourself online. For me, I like to be dynamic in the room. If you ever see me speak in person, you'll get that sense. We'd love to do activities. So my goal was, how do I bring myself online? So then I'd focus on creating the virtual experiences that I would like to do to give audiences that type of experience. So that is what our focus is for today. Again, regardless of your content or your technical ability, how to bring yourself online in a way that's authentic and gives you this five-star virtual engagement. As Matt mentioned, our organization is called F.E.A.R.S Advantage, because we know the number one thing that stops entrepreneurs and stops business owners from doing the right thing oftentimes is our fears. So we want to use fears to fuel equitable actions, relationships, and systems. And we are on this mission to help 5 million leaders advance equity in their organizations by 2030. And so part of this is also how folks communicate, we know is a huge part of DEI. If you're not familiar with diversity, equity, inclusion is, let's imagine like this. Every time we communicate, we are either practicing or not practicing diversity, equity, inclusion. Just for me to communicate with you right now, there's a diversity of people right here in the room, right? So I have to practice saying the words and really using visuals and different techniques to reach each and every one of you. I include your voice in the conversation as we'll go through even virtually. And then the equity is allowing what you share to guide the conversation, especially when I'm in a teaching mode. But even if we're having a one-on-one conversation, as I hear about your life and you give me a chance to see where your vision is and where you're going, the equity is allowing you to drive the conversation as much as I do. So communication at its core is DEI. For those of us who are having poor communication and we're seeing meetings not go well and companies break down, people are not practicing diversity, equity, inclusion. So when we're here with this 5-star virtual engagement plan, it's also giving folks the ability to even have hard conversations online and ideally make them more enjoyable. That's at least what I know. Lisa was the one who found us in the ether as people were going to Zoom. So I always want to give a shout out to Lisa for being able to catch on to that vision early on and introduce us to the rest of the Pylea team. So thank you for that. As we keep on going here, we'll jump into what we are going to be talking about. And I want to make sure that you know this is for you. It's for those of you who are founders, executives, business owners, managers, coaches, speakers, trainers, facilitators. Go ahead and pop a title that you resonate with. Whether it's one on the screen, I just want to know who's in the room. What's a title that you resonate with so I have a better idea of who's here? At a high level, I want to tell you with this 5-star virtual engagement plan, we will cover 5 stars. The first one being connection. The second one being, well, there you go. You see how it loaded out of order. This is, as we get to the confidence piece later on, we'll talk about, being able to troubleshoot smoothly. So things like that don't phase you. But communication, collaboration, creativity, and confidence. These are the 5 stars that we will be reviewing and really being able to provide you with some skills and resources to help you go from where you are with your virtual engagement to where you want to be. Now, in order to do that, I need to check in with you all. Since you're coming from different places, you also have different perspectives on virtual engagement. We're going to do 2 processes. The first is going to be to launch a poll. So have F.E.A.R.S, who's there in the background. F.E.A.R.S, you can give the folks a wave so they know who you are. And F.E.A.R.S is taking care of our tech in the background. So F.E.A.R.S is going to launch a poll, 2-question poll that will give you a chance to just share a little bit about the types of virtual engagements that you are running currently, as well as what you might consider to be one of your pain points in that area. And then that will help me to be able to filter out what we actually talk about to make sure that you walk out of here with your precious time that you're investing, that you get a return on your investment of having skills you can use right away. Sound good? Let me get some solid head nods out there on the screen if that sounds good to you all. Fantastic. I even got some thumbs up and a smile. Great. It means we're rolling. So F.E.A.R.S, go ahead and launch the poll. Zoom does its own little trickery things where it will show me the results later on. So what we're going to do in the meantime is as we were looking at your poll data and being able to filter where we're going to focus, I actually will ask y'all to participate in the breakout room. And so what we'll be doing is putting you in breakout rooms of 3 people. And what we'll ask you to do within a 5-minute time frame is to, 1, share your name. You'll take turns sharing your name, your vision for a 5-star virtual presentation, and then 1 skill or tool that you want to learn to help create that vision. And this is going to be different for each of you, but this will be helpful for us to know. So that way, again, we can point you in the right direction. And then there's 3 of you. You would choose 1 person who can report back to the larger group with a summary of what you shared. And that summary can be shared in either the breakout room in the chat, or some people can unmute themselves and share. And the instructions are also there in the chat, right? So what it might sound like is, hey, my name is Kemy Joseph. My vision for a 5-star virtual presentation is one where even in the middle of business, people pause what they're doing and really get engaged in the presentation. 1 skill or tool I want to learn to help create that vision. I want to learn how to get more people to smile when I crack my corny jokes. How about that, right? So it can be as simple as that. God, some of y'all smile, some of you are like, you're not gonna get me with that. Right, it's up to you. But the point is, it can be that simple. You don't have to get too complicated. But we'll put you in the breakout rooms. Any questions or concerns before we do this process? Alrighty, ready, set, and go to your breakout rooms. Please stay in there until we bring you out. It'll only be a total of 5 minutes. We'll see you soon. So let's get 3 volunteers. If you raise your hand, then we can establish a speaking order. So I ask y'all in your breakout rooms to pick 1 person who can come back and share. Can you raise your hand if that was you, whether you were volunteered or were voluntold? We have Maggie, we got Monica. There should be a couple more of y'all. Who else is there? We got Lisa. All right, and then we got Mark. So I'm going to keep the 3 M's, Lisa, if that's cool with you. If that's cool, I see there's Maggie, Monica, and Mark. The rest of y'all can share in the chat. So let's do it like that. Maggie, then we'll go to Monica, then we'll go to Mark. If you can just take about 45 seconds to share a summary of what your group shared in the breakout room, that'd be perfect. So we'll go Maggie, Monica, and then Mark. The rest of y'all can pop it in the chat. Thank you.
Awesome. I think there were themes actually among the three of us that there was a vision of really having a connected, participatory, collaborative experience, and that's what would really create a five-star virtual experience. And so the skills that were sort of tossed out would are confidence and like ways to check in, ways to get people checking in on how people are doing, and ways to keep people engaged throughout the content so that it's not a one-way experience.
Oh yeah, I love that. So I appreciate the call for more connection and that collaboration, and then being able to have the ability for folks to actually participate in ways that are authentic. And so thank you for that summary. And so we will continue on there. So Maggie did a great job rocking it, right? Shared what folks are envisioning for their 5-star virtual engagement, and then also some of the skills that they're looking for. And thank you, Lisa, for popping in the chat. The rest of you are also welcome to do the same. So we had next is Monica, and then we'll finish out with Mark.
Cool. Yeah. So two of the three of us in our group are interested in facilitating group events where they're very engaging and collaborative. And I think a theme there was having a space, creating a space that's safe enough that people can share vulnerably, speak up, even introverts and extroverts and that kind of thing. And then one of us has a goal of doing a TED Talk, and
nice.
they are interested in finding a topic that they feel really is going to serve their audience and be very unique, and that their audience can engage with their heart and their mind and things like that.
Oh, beautiful. I appreciate that summary, Monica. So we talked about, yeah, I love you also mentioned in order to get people engaging, creating that safe space where people are willing to share, introverts and extroverts alike, and giving them that space to do it, and even kind of teeing up the ability to, I'm going to mute everybody. I love the mute button, by the way. It's one of my favorite things that Zoom has brought into our lives. So somebody was like shuffling, I just go ahead and mute everybody. So then also even somebody wanting to cast a vision of their TED Talk, and then finding a topic that will serve many audiences. And so even as you do that, thinking about how to engage those diverse audiences. So fantastic. And then bring us home, Mark. What do you got?
Okay, so our group had Lulu and Matt, and let's call it our shared vision was around creating high engagement as well, and a sense of community and connection. And something that was most compelling is that we wanted our session or event to be so compelling that the community would shift things in their calendar to make it a priority. So that's a huge vision. In terms of the skills and the tools, the ability to establish rapport in the very beginning and create that sense of engagement early on so that everybody feels a part of and wants to engage, as well as making it inclusive so everybody has a voice and it's not just driven by the facilitator. And finally, creating a sense of connection so people actually want to talk to each other and come back another time.
Yeah, I love it. The list is getting longer. Thank you for that, Mark. It's that one, having the event where people shift their calendars to be there, right? That, I mean, otherwise, why the heck are we even being there? So absolutely. And then being able to establish the rapport that allows people to engage early on, to make it more inclusive to where it's not just the one facilitator's voice, it's everyone's voice, to be also able to help people connect so then they're willing to come back, right? So I appreciate between Maggie, Monica, and Mark being able to share those things. So I appreciate y'all sharing all that. So you've laid out a tall order to cover in about an hour. So we have an hour left. But the reason we went through those two processes, for those, can you actually share the poll data that folks had shared? And that way we can see that piece. And also, whenever you ask for feedback from people, it's important that you get a chance to show it to them. So go ahead and show the poll. And can you all see it? Because for some reason, Zoom is blocking me from seeing it. So y'all are getting like behind the scenes access that not even I get for some reason. So we saw that for most part, folks are doing the one-on-one sessions. A few of y'all are doing the meetings. And so the interesting thing that most of y'all were talking about kind of shifting into events, because nobody's doing trainings. At least everybody who took the poll said you're not doing trainings. And then one person is doing keynote speeches. And then when we look here at the some of the pain points, we talk about being authentic online, building trust in the virtual space, getting participation, and also being able to make it unique. So you've pretty much, there's a spread. What I'll do is hyper focus on a couple of them in order to make sure that you all get what you need. And we'll leave some time for questions at the end. So this will be, I'll keep things at a high level, and I will ask you all to help me understand where to further focus, since you pretty much asked for the whole presentation. This presentation can easily be 3 hours as we go through each one of the 5 stars that I showed you as I'm loading them here. Each of the 5 stars has essentially 5 bullet points underneath. So if we covered all of them, I'd be giving you 15 different tips. What I noticed is that people ask for a lot of tips, but then we generally only apply the ones that make the most sense for where we are. So I'm going to give you permission to ignore whatever doesn't make sense to you right now and really focus on the tools that make the most sense for you. So we'll dive in and we will just get right into it. And the reason we went through those experiences is because I want to be able to reference it back to you, what you saw me do. Right. So even over the last 30 minutes, it's not just an introduction for introduction's sake. I pretty much took you through most of what I want to show you in a moment. So before I go any further, what has already stood out to you that you're like, oh, I like that? What have I done that you've liked so far? Including from when you first got in with the music and the names and all that stuff, from that very first point. I know some of y'all just came in, so you're like, at least you didn't call me out. Great, that's fine, right? So what actually stood out to you so far? I'll let you pop that in the chat as I load up the first slide. You welcome people by name, the quality of your video, right? And most people ask me, what's the camera? So I'll put it in the chat real quick before people start to ask, but you don't necessarily need all this. So this is Sony A5100, which is a camera that I have. So I'm seeing here the polls, so yeah. So you're getting a chance to be creative. I love it. Asking people about the food that describes us. All right, great. You're already seeing how we like to engage. You're picking up on those things. The whole point of this is to model those pieces, because I can give you information, but modeling it is more important than all of that. And so as we go through this next piece, even though I go through them at a high level, you're seeing them in motion, and I'm always I'm open to stopping and giving a little bit more detail. So we will go from the high level. When we're talking about the F.E.A.R.S advantage, for us, this program fits into our relationship building category, because we really are wanting to help people stay connected, especially online. So again, we're going to go over connection, communication, collaboration, creativity, and confidence. Let's first go into connection, which for us is all about building trust. You'd be surprised, maybe you're not surprised, that about 50% of the employees that we survey will say they don't feel safe or don't trust in their workplace. So if you're coming in as a presenter trying to bring virtual engagement, like, oh, I want this, and then you're not getting that, one thing might be that they don't trust you because you came in by somebody else's recommendation, right? So just know that that's something that we walk into quite often. Or they don't also trust that your presentation is going to actually be good because they don't know you yet. All that is fair from our perspective. So we're always about how do we build trust right from the beginning. And some of you already mentioned this. So we've been doing these 5 pieces: set the tone, build comfort, show your face, share stories, and create agreements. Now, we didn't do all of these because I didn't create agreements, but I want to show you one way that we create agreements. And you're welcome to take a screenshot of this. I'll pause so you know where it came from, right? But you can go ahead and take a screenshot as we go through it. So set the tone right away. Every time you see me doing a presentation, and besides doing presentations, I also do sales calls. I'm always playing music. Playing music is the one technological piece I hope you take away, and I'll show you a little bit of it, how to do this at the end. You would be surprised how many people, it's a pattern interrupt, because most people are going from Zoom room to Zoom room to Zoom room. So when they come to my call, I'm saying we're going to do something different. I want to set the tone here. So playing music, like y'all said, welcoming folks by name. For the folks whose name I got wrong, being able to also set the tone that it's okay to correct me as the instructor, because I want to make sure I honor you from the get-go. So setting the tone is about what you're doing. If it's your meeting, you command the space, especially if you want to make it an invitational space. Make sure that your body language is invitational right at the top. To build comfort, right? We can acknowledge that we don't want to be on Zoom calls. So sometimes in the very beginning, when we were getting on Zoom, there was a push that everybody had to have their camera on. But that's not an equitable stance to take when people have different technology limitations. When we were working with folks out on the West Coast, especially in the tech space, they have technology privilege. There would be times where we're on calls and nobody got kicked out of Zoom. No one's calls dropped. Whereas we worked in different communities and people didn't have the bandwidth to be on camera. So when I say create that comfort or really build the comfort, it's letting folks know, hey, I know you're all over the place. You might even be in your car. I just welcome your participation in ways that feel unique to you. We're always doing challenge by choices, so invitational language. And notice that we start to build that out by asking y'all to engage in the chat in small ways and making sure that it's not so serious. Even when we have very serious topics, we're always wanting to build comfort and trust with us to be able to shift the tone. And then show your face, right? There is presenters who only have their slides up. You don't see the person. We're like, show your face, show your face, show your face, right? People want to be able to connect with you as a human being. So as you show them who you are, you also show the facial reactions. I also want to encourage you, if you're ever troubleshooting, to make sure that we can still see your face. Some people have like Zoom face where they're like, okay, where's that thing at? And they're like, you can see them struggling or having a tough time. Like, hey, your face is still on camera. Make sure you show us the face you want us to see. And ideally, we're showing them a face that's welcoming, that is saying, hey, I'm grateful to be here just as much as you are, which also encourages us to look at the camera. I know we have different camera heights. Sometimes the camera's down here. I rarely look at the participants, which are on this screen. I try to always look at what's happening on my camera. And people say, Kemy, you feel like you're speaking right to me. It's because I'm intentionally making sure the camera is this height, and you don't have to have a standing desk like I do. You can put books and so on. We've seen people do some really cool things, but you want to make sure that you're looking at people and showing them your face. So that way, when you do things like tell them a story, they can get involved in your story. They can see your emotion. And when we tell a story, what's the number one thing we want to do? You probably already know. It's like, get to the what. Put in the chat, get to the what. When we want to tell someone a story, get to the what. You can probably already fill in that context. Get to the point, right? You get points for that. Another version of that is take us into a moment. Take us into a moment, or take us into a room. So I mentioned this story earlier, and I said that I was traveling in 2019 and I started getting those emails. Then where did I tell you I was at when I felt like I had the worst time, when I was breaking down? Where did I tell you I was at? Who remembers? Someone says like, right there. Yeah, you're right here in my office. So that way, when I'm telling you about this virtual engagement and then spending months and months building out the studio right here in my office, I can return to that moment as an anchor point. So get people into a moment with you into your stories, and make sure that you tell a story with a point, and that you make a point with a story, so they get to weave together. And that way you can, even if your story's short, it can be a mundane story. Like sometimes I tell people about how I adopted a dog during COVID, and her name is Chi, such a sweetheart. But in the very beginning, she was so scared of me that as we were walking out of the door, right there in my living room, we're walking out of the door, and she wouldn't go with me. And then eventually I had to like kind of pull her a little bit along the way. And then she was like, oh yeah, we're going outside. Great. I love outside. I forgot that this is what's on the other side of the door. How many people are we training as coaches that feel that resistance because they forgot what's on the other side of the door is more exciting than what's on the current side that they're on? Get to the point, make a point, and keep rolling. Finally, create agreements. I love how somebody asked earlier or mentioned that one of the pieces they want to do is create safe spaces. Who decides that a space is safe? I tell all my clients, no matter what we're doing, I as a facilitator do not decide that this is a safe space. Yeah, Kari says each person. It's saying each and every one of us in this room decides that it's a safe space or not. So it's important that as we give people options and give them the challenge by choice options, because we don't know their level of safety in their organization. So I'm always saying, people, share what you feel comfortable sharing. Step up in the ways that you feel most comfortable stepping up, and just know that as long as you're here, you're going to get value. As long as you're here and paying attention, even if you're not on camera, you will get value, right? Which kind of brings us all in alignment with this idea that if I'm going to build comfort, I really want them to see that I am reinforcing that at every step of the way. And one thing I want to show you with agreements, for those of you who use agreements, here's something that you can do. This is also going to show you another tool that you can use. So you all can see my screen, right? Has some agreements. Now this is I'm sharing a screen now. So you're like, whoa, what happened there? So I'm sharing the screen now. Sharing the screen. You all can see this, yes? Give some solid head nods. One thing we'll talk about later with sharing screens is please make sure people can see the screen that you're sharing. Otherwise, I've done presentation where I'm talking for like 5-10 minutes and someone's like, are we supposed to be seeing something? Because we're only seeing your desktop. So please make sure they can see your screen. Now, I'm going to walk you through just a high level of how we do this. One is that we generally have people define. If we say, hey, we're going to establish some group agreements, I want us to define what these mean to really give us a chance to actually agree to them. Because when we talk about the difference between a rule and an agreement, rules are meant to be what? Put in the chat, you know what this is. Rules are meant to be what? I see some of y'all laughing, you rule followers. Rules are meant to be. Somebody says follow. I appreciate you, Maggie. I mean, you can tell I'm a kind person who likes to wear bow ties, but I often can nudge some rules in the right direction. Let's call it that, right? I'm not going to snitch on myself. But anyhow, a difference between rules and agreements. Rules are often top down, they're given. Same with our clients. If we give rules top down to our clients, they're like, hey, I'm paying you to support me. That's not fair. Like I want to actually agree and commit to something versus being told what to do. So when you're doing this with a group, one of the things I love is called annotations. So let's imagine that we actually have gone through this process and we've talked to these agreements and we have language around them, around upholding confidentiality, give respect, reducing distractions. Notice it doesn't say eliminating distractions, it's talking about reducing them so we can silence some of the buzzers and put our phones facing down. We can go through the whole thing, being on time, being open-minded, and having a great time. One of my favorite ways to start to really confirm these agreements is using what's called annotations. So just above where this screen is showing up, where it says group agreements, just above that, it should say Kemy Joseph is sharing a screen, and then you should have an arrow that gives you a drop-down button. And then when you see that, one of the options in that drop-down will be annotate. You can give me some head nods when you're seeing it. Remember to practice your Zoom face, right? Remember, I told y'all this earlier, so y'all can practice looking for information in a way. You don't have to necessarily smile, but just be mindful that I'm still seeing y'all, right? So you see the annotations. Now go ahead, and when you get to the annotation, you'll get options to, there's one that's right in the middle that says stamp. And use any of the stamps, and you can put it on the screen to let me know that the stamps are working. If you don't know where the stamps are, go ahead and unmute yourself, and that way I can find out. But some people are going stamp crazy. I love it when people realize their stamps in Zoom. They're like, holy crap, I realized I've been missing out this whole time. Now, as a facilitator, a couple of things I want to tell you with these stamps. Like one is that you can actually stop people from annotating as when you're the one who's a facilitator. So for example, right now people are going stamp wild. So you can actually disable annotations, right? So now people are like, oh, I can't annotate anymore. Yeah, because I need you to pay attention. And then you can also, when you're doing the annotation, you can go ahead and clear the screen at any given time. It's not personal, just we need to keep on rolling, right? So we can clear the screen. Now that you know where the stamps are, the point of all this was to show you this one process. Is I want you to use the check mark annotation to let me, or actually we'll use the star annotation. So we're talking about 5-star virtual engagement. Put a star next to the agreement that you feel will be the easiest for you to uphold. So I'm going to re-enable this. Put a star next to the agreement you believe it will be the easiest to uphold. Go ahead and put a star. You should have the ability. You're going to use the stamp again. We're using the star. Maggie, what type of device are you on? MacBook. Okay, so again, if you're looking at my screen that says group agreements, right above that should say Kemy Joseph is sharing the screen. Do you see that, Maggie? I'm like looking at your picture. You see that? And then you have a drop down. It's like a little arrow that will give you. Oh, there you go. All right. See, thank you for clarifying, making sure. Now I'm gonna go ahead and pause the annotations one more time just to be able to see what you all shared. So I'm seeing here that some people annotated elsewhere. I'm not sure what y'all were doing, and I'm over here drawing now. Lots is happening on here. So for the most part, folks said give respect being the agreement that is most easier to uphold. And as Fardos is mentioning there in the chat, if you're on an iPad or Chromebook, some of those devices do not allow you to annotate. For the rest of y'all who are on computers, you can. And this is also a great indicator to say, hey, if you cannot annotate, go ahead and put in the chat which agreement you think is the easiest to uphold, right? Being inclusive. Now, what I'd like for you to do is then use a stamp, use the heart stamp. I'm going to re-enable annotation, use the heart stamp to put the agreement, to identify the agreement that you believe will be the hardest or most challenging to uphold. So go ahead and use the heart to indicate the agreement that you believe would be the hardest or most difficult to uphold. And for those of you who can't annotate, you're welcome to also put it in the chat. Reduce distractions is going hard right now. Absolutely, be on time. Have a great. Some people are like, I'm not going to have a great time here. This is yeah. And this is why I also tell people, I don't decide that you have a great time either. Like, you have to decide that. I'm here to offer you one. Somebody even put an X, so you're trying to cross something out. But the point of all this is to say, if you're ever going to establish group agreements, especially in a virtual space, let me go ahead and stop these annotations, right? So y'all have learned a new tool that I hope is helpful for y'all. So in this processing piece, right now we're talking about agreements, but you can use it for any type of practical content that you're teaching, asking people, for example, what would be easiest and what would be hardest. I'm seeing pretty much by landslide that reducing distractions and potentially being on time would be two of the hardest agreements that people will uphold. So if I'm doing a multi-hour type of training, I'm only going to use agreements when I'm doing a longer type training like this, or sometimes multi-day training. I want to be able to ask folks to share this so then I can be mindful of both celebrating what people think is going to be easy. Okay, great. People say that they're going to be able to bring respect. Fantastic. And anytime people are struggling with distractions, what we would do to close out this portion is ask them, hey, let's go into a breakout room really quick and let's talk about what we can do as a group to help reduce our own distractions. That way, Kemy's not telling you what to do. We're creating our own strategies to then prevent or help ourselves, support ourselves in reducing distractions. And so then when we can come to an actual agreement, people feel more confident in agreeing. If you're offering a list of agreements that no one has talked about or discussed what's hard and easy about them, and then you ask them to agree, they're just kind of giving you lip service. And most of us have seen that. So especially when working with diverse communities and folks who are using more consensus model, please make a more engaging experience of creating your agreements to make sure people can honor them. Now, I appreciate that, and I appreciate y'all diving in. And so again, there's so much we can go into. I want to know from you all in the chat before we continue, and I think F.E.A.R.S has that. What is the number one thing you're taking away from this portion? What was the number one thing you're taking away from this portion? Thank you, Roth. Appreciate it. It's just the beginning. This is a 1 of 5 stars. And I'll also let y'all know that we of how y'all can stay in touch afterwards, because we are going to gift y'all something as well. So yeah, Zoom technology is our friend, Sandy says. And the reason we don't talk too much about technology is because you can do a lot of these on different platforms now. Zoom to me has the most robust features, but I also was on a WebEx call earlier last week, I guess, and they now have some of those same features. But Zoom is certainly one of my best friends. Yeah, getting people actively engaged, which is what y'all talked about. Be careful giving coaches annotation. No, let's reframe that. Look at the engagement these coaches got from being able to annotate. Y'all were like kids again, right? That's what I'm talking about. Most people have not used these tools, and we've been in Zoom for over a year right now. So let's make sure that we give people a chance to have a little bit more fun. So that will close out our connection. Are y'all feeling a little bit more connected here as we go through and get some solid head nods? Now, we'll talk a little bit about communication, and then we'll go through the rest of these at a high level, as I mentioned, and then we will get a chance to dive into a little bit of Q&A. So communication for me is all about guiding engagement. And one, as you've been seeing me model, is give as clear instructions as possible. And you notice what you've seen me do, and the reason I animate all of this is to give you one instruction at a time as best I can. Now, we just went through something that's pretty complicated, which is annotations. And for the most part, like 90% of y'all were able to roll with me, and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify for those who didn't see where we were going. But one, I give clear instructions, but then separately, I want to explain the virtual interactions separately than the actual instruction of what I'm telling you to do. Sometimes we mix them together and people then start looking for the thing that we're asking them to do. So let's give one step at a time even to competent and capable adults. It's worth giving one step at a time, especially when we saw that the hardest thing for us to do right now is reduce the distraction. So it's worthwhile. You might as well repeat it and give it step by step. Ideally, even put it on the screen if you can. You saw earlier that we even put it into the breakout room to make sure you saw the instructions multiple times and y'all were able to really honor that process. Oh, sorry about that. And then ideally announce timeframes. To be honest, this is the one I struggle with the most. What this is called is road mapping or benchmarking. So it's saying, for example, hey, we're going to be together for an hour, and I'm going to spend 15 minutes talking about communication. That way people can wrap their heads around what's going to happen. I'm usually good at, reminding people of the whole time frame we have together, but sometimes I don't know how long each section is going to take. What I'm challenging myself to do is saying it'll take about 6 or 7 minutes. It might be a little bit longer if we get really into it, but it might take around 6 or 7 minutes. So what I'm gonna even encourage y'all to announce the timeframes, because then people can, one, confirm that they're still available mentally for that, but then they also know when you're gonna release them, right? That is a big piece for people. If you want folks to stay engaged, staying engaged is like asking someone to be on. If you're gonna ask them to be on, let them know when you're going to allow or like invite them to kind of be off, including taking breaks and announcing when those breaks are going to be over. And then the other piece here is assign a speaking order. You all saw me do this when we came back from the break. I asked Maggie, Monica, and Mark to speak. And then I told them how long would they be speaking for? About 45 seconds. So they're like, okay, I don't have to give a dissertation about what just happened in my breakout room. I know it's going to be Maggie, Monica, and then Mark. So then I can prepare. This is literally still about building comfort, giving people the understanding of when you're going to call on them. One of my mentors showed me, this is a group called Character Strong, that you can ask people to even put exclamation marks in front of their names if they're okay being called upon. Because a lot of people don't want to be called. Like, that brings us back to school days when the teacher's like, Kemy, and I was like, I don't know about y'all, but I got expelled when I was in 3rd grade. So I was not the ideal student, right? So when people, I don't like to call on people at random like that, that feel like very intrusive, and that kind of triggers me sometimes. So I'm like, all right, put an exclamation mark in front of your name if you're willing to be called upon, because then those are people who are really excited. And sometimes, depending on the safety in the room, and I've seen y'all do this in other presentations, say, hey, if Matt just spoke, Matt, who would you like to pass it to? And give that person a chance to also speak. But again, I always balance that with how comfortable people are actually feeling in the room. So, and Lisa, sometimes we will put the list of folks in the chat, exactly, so people can track along where things are going. And finally here, create a listening environment. And what does that mean? Especially on Zoom, creating a listening environment. One of my other mentors, Jimmy, we were talking about being an MC for virtual events or physical events. And he says, an MC is really the audience, is like embodying the audience on stage. So anytime I get to be an MC, that I carry that with me to make sure that if a speaker has just shared something powerful, that I'm trying to react like the audience. Hey, did y'all hear that? I want to repeat back what folks have said to make sure that if I ask you to speak as a presenter, that I want to reflect that back to you to make sure that other people are listening. But I also did this earlier when I said, can we please give Maggie, Monica, and Mark one of the Zoom reactions to say we appreciated what they shared. Y'all are in a culture of plus up. Most people do not plus up things. They just kind of sit back and be like, yeah, whatever. But I want to make sure anybody who was a speaker who shared their voice on Zoom got a chance to be acknowledged by me and then by their peers or whoever is in the room together. And so when you're doing this with the one-on-one coaching, this is also important to make sure that your client feels like you actually heard them. So just I'll leave it at that in terms of creating a listening environment. Now, I know that you've heard a lot. Kari says, should we even make intros optional? Can you elaborate a little bit on that, Kari?
I was thinking about not calling on people and that habit that I have of saying, hey, will you choose the next person? And I often use that for introductions. And I'm probably really guilty of this, but I really want people to be on camera whenever possible. And I really want everyone's voice to be in the room in some way. And so I'm curious about like, how do we navigate the respect of people not wanting to bring their voice into the room, but also encouraging that shift that can happen when people are really engaged in that way.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for that, Kari. And I love, and I was, I've been on the receiving side of that. To me, that's fine. especially when we are noticing the first part is about building the trust, right? So I think this is the biggest thing to know. When we're in this kind of environment here, I guess one of the next things we'll be talking about is checking in with people on their level of trust or their level of comfort, right? So I think what I've seen so far in this community, there's a high level of trust. So those things to me will fly. And you can also check in with people on the back end. Hey, are you comfortable with that? If not, can we do it a different way? Especially when we're in the smaller rooms, I notice more people are willing to turn their cameras on. So I think part of this is the give and take based on inviting people and building the comfort that says, hey, even if you're not on camera, like I haven't been on camera in some of the meetings with P.I.L.E.A. because I've been like roaming the earth somewhere. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna be here, but like, if I'm on camera, it's gonna be too distracting. So that's me kind of pay respect to the group compared to me being distracted. So I've even in those scenarios, I've appreciated that y'all let me be how I was at that time. And so I imagine, especially P.I.L.E.A. as a group who's all about checking in with each other and making sure we can clean things up, that being able to follow up with folks if you ever have that concern is a great way to model what we'll talk about later on, is modeling the growth mindset. Hey, can we give some snaps to Kari? We'll do some snaps here. Hey, look at that. Or some people also do this if you, this is for sign language for clapping. So again, invitational language. I appreciate you, Kari. And I imagine other people were thinking the same thing. Thank you. A lot of people will come to our DEI trainings and be like, oh crap, I just did that. It's like, it doesn't mean that things are wrong. Like we're trying to give you some of the promising practices as things that we've seen, including when we go into breakout rooms. We used to do people in dyads. Again, we would check in on levels of trust and safety, and some people did not feel comfortable going in breakout rooms. So we started doing triads, a minimum, to make sure that people would have a witness if anything kind of went awry in the room. And in the organizations that are the most tense, we sometimes even give people the option to let us know who they do not want to be in a breakout room with. Like that takes a little bit more thought and intention. That depends on your goals of your presentation. We are often going into social war zones, so it's important that we're super intentional about what we're bringing. If you're going into places that are safe and people are familiar with you, they have the trust, it's a little bit easier to get things rolling, right? So what we'll do on that note is F.E.A.R.S, we'll set up a breakout room. We'll shuffle people up and put in new breakout rooms of 3 people. And this time you'll be sharing what's one thing that you're taking away from this section. And that way, I think it'll be in the breakout room. It'll say, what is one thing you're taking away from this section, and one way that you want to apply that into your work. And so we will copy that after all this. So while we are doing the pause, I will also tell you one of my favorite things is troubleshooting calmly. So as we're figuring that out, are there any questions or concerns before, or comments on reflecting on that previous slide before we go into the next breakout room? I would love to hear a couple of folks here in the spirit of what we just talked about, right? Invitational language. So we'll have time for 2 people to share something you just learned from this portion, and the rest of y'all are welcome to continue adding them into the chat. So what do we got here from a couple of folks we haven't heard from yet? What are you taking away from this communication section?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for me, the idea of seeing myself as the MC was a great reframe. It actually took me out of my living room and into a big room with a whole lot of people actually in it. It was like a total just shift for me that like I feel like I'm going to carry that with me today in a profoundly important way.
Fantastic. We'll give a shout out to Jimmy Nelson, who shared that with me. I think one of his mentors shared it with him. So we're passing it along. So please. And thank you so much, Roth, for being willing to jump up when everybody else was like, I don't want to talk right now. It's okay. We can keep the ball rolling. We got other things to roll on. And I appreciate what I'm seeing in the chat, reflecting the audience, being able to give clear instructions, engage participants in a consensual. We really want to create a culture of consent, even in Zoom, especially honoring people's no. If like nobody wants to talk, great. I got more things I can share, right? I'm always ready, but I want to also invite folks in, knowing that people learn differently and is being able to adapt in that way. So we will continue on here. That we covered communication, and now we'll be looking at collaboration. So for the collaboration piece, this is what most of y'all were chatting about around building community. And so this is a portion where I'll share principles as well as some tools to help you do so. So I'll outline the principles for a moment here about dialogue, being able to create a shared vision, having check-ins, building sequential actions, and really creating a sense of intimacy. And some of the tools you can use for doing those things are chat, whiteboards, polls, activities, and breakout rooms. Now, by the time we get to here, you've seen pretty much all of these in this presentation, yes? Right, so notice that in order to create going from a monologue to a dialogue here, I was sharing a lot, and that's the monologue vibe. And there's appropriate when, especially when I'm doing like one-way presentations or sometimes webinars where there's not going to be as much of a dialogue, but the dialogue can happen a little bit differently, especially when we're asking people to contribute in the chat. Notice before I ask anybody to share their voice on the camera, I ask y'all to share things in the chat first to help you get comfortable with sharing, and then we start to build from there. Right, so the dialogue happens in a lot of different ways. We call it the call to comment, CTC. What do you actually want people to comment? And from the beginning, y'all saw that I asked you to comment about what food best represents how you're feeling today, what city represents your personality, and what's one thing you're grateful for. Things that kind of break us up from the monotony of what we normally are sharing on Zoom calls. So then when I ask folks to come on the microphone or to share in the chat, they're already built that muscle saying, great, I can participate in a way that's different than what I do in other Zoom rooms. And then casting a shared vision beyond, speaking that, it's also using what we did earlier with the agreements, sharing a whiteboard or sharing your slides in a way that literally to have a shared vision, we have to be looking at the same thing. So using your whiteboard or showing your slides is a fantastic way to make sure we're all looking at the same thing. And notice we're not necessarily talking about the content of your slides or the content of your whiteboard, just making sure that whenever you're sharing a whiteboard, hopefully the purpose is to have a shared vision of what you are all talking about and doing. Now with the check-ins, we did a version of this earlier with the polls as well. Really quick poll, what do you all need from this process? Let me not assume that you all are jumping into the training room. Some of y'all you're specifically doing one-on-one coaching, so we also want to support you with this. Things like whiteboards are still helpful in one-on-one coaching or screen sharing to make sure that your client is seeing exactly what you want them to see. Polls are going to be more helpful when there's more than one person in a room, but you can also, whenever I'm talking with clients, the way I use polls is usually doing things on a scale of 1 to 10. Yes and no questions don't really, for me, doesn't give me as much information I would like. So even if I'm asking client, so how comfortable are you with Zoom on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 being that you're not comfortable at all, 10 being that you're very comfortable using Zoom. And whatever they rate there is me taking a poll of where they're at. And if they say a 7, say, okay, great. What's helping you? What's helping you rate so high at a 7? What's contributing to that 7? And what can we do if we want to move you forward to get you to an 8? But now I have a scale, I have a poll that we can keep on moving progressively, even if I'm working with somebody one-on-one. And then action. Action is my favorite thing on Zoom. It gets a little bit weird, right? Especially if you ask people to stand up. Mostly y'all have been sitting down. But notice how we start to facilitate action. This is some parts of doing activities and also parts of the chat. So whenever we're doing, whenever I know if I'm going to build up to an activity, if I know, for example, I'm going to ask people to stand up at some point, I want to build up to that and getting people to engage in the chat, giving them a chance to use the Zoom reactions, giving them a chance to do a thumbs up. I asked y'all to give someone a thumbs up, to give a clap, to give a snap. Those are all small actions that are building people up to use their body physically to say, hey, I'd like for you to stand up. And it's okay that it's a little bit awkward. It's okay that your camera's at a weird angle. I'm building the comfort. And then I'm asking them to do the thing, and I'm doing whatever I'm asking them to do as well. Right, so as we're building the actions, like just know an activity is made up of a bunch of actions. How do we get people ready for that? If you come out of nowhere with an, hey, everybody do this, and they're like, what? I don't want to do this. And whenever, for example, if we would ask people to do an activity, one of my favorites is an activity called Bust a Move, where we ask people to take turns moving, and everybody else will see them and then also move. So notice I'm using the word movement or move your body however you feel most comfortable versus the word dance. What happens when we say dance? People are like, oh, I'm not drunk enough. I didn't bring my dancing shoes. I got to stretch. We start to put a lot more pressure on the thing. But if I say you can move however you feel most comfortable, and then give examples like this could count as movement. Head nod can count as movement, right? So back to the question of how do we help people feel most comfortable? We also can give them a range of things to demonstrate what engagement can look like, especially in diverse audiences where we want to make sure what we're saying and then what they're seeing from us is integral. By the way, I don't know if you know this, only 7% of our communication is the words that we speak. Some people are nodding their head. It's called the 7% rule. I'm like, why the heck is it called the 7% rule and not the 93% rule, which means that 93% of what we communicate is how we actually show up. And Matt said this earlier, when you get the chance to meet Kim, you see his being. So are we actually being engaging, not just talking about being engaging? Finally, with the intimacy, Zoom gives us a chance to really have this focus that we are, like I said earlier, that I'm talking directly to you. And a couple ways to create intimacy. One, I love one of my mentors is a group called Be Me. They mentioned like, hey, what are you willing to put down? What burden are you willing to put down to be present during this call right now? And that includes like making this call a one screen call. So, hey, can you minimize anything else? It will be there with you and for you when you're done. Let's go ahead and minimize it so you can connect with me right now. So we can connect as a small group, however many people are there. And I mentioned this earlier, beyond doing that for the one-on-one clients, being able, whenever you have the opportunity to do breakout rooms, assuming that it's safe, making them around 3 people to give folks a chance to share things that they wouldn't otherwise share in the main room. And you see me do this the first time we put you in the breakout rooms, we actually modeled what we wanted you to share, what it could look like to make sure that when people get into breakout rooms, they know exactly what we're asking them to do. Has anybody had the experience where you sent folks into a breakout room and then they came back and they're like, did you do the thing? Like, no. All right, so what was the breakdown? Sometimes the breakdown is the instructions, or sometimes the breakdown that they're not paying attention, so they need those instructions repeated and modeled to make sure they're good to go moving forward. All right, so this is the snapshot of the collaboration. Again, I'll give you a chance to take a screenshot if you haven't already done so. And again, most of the platforms have these tools, but this is when we can start to get into the more technical pieces that we can talk about offline. Any questions or concerns about this? So I'll leave room on the mic for one person to be able to share. The rest of y'all can also put in the chat what's one thing you're taking away from this slide. And we'll, as y'all are doing that, we will give time for one person who would like to ask a question or share something about this portion of the presentation. Or anyone want to unmute themselves? Or I might call on someone to make an invitation. Jomar, you're at the top of my screen.
Yeah, I'll go.
You're about to do it anyway. I saw that. So all right, cool. I think I can call on you. All right, one thought, what do you got?
Yeah, what's standing out to me, man, is every theme that you've covered so far. So connection, I don't remember the second one.
I can put it back on here. Yep.
Connection, communication, and collaboration. You're sort of taking opportunities at each one to build comfort and trust. So in the collaboration theme, you talked about movement. And so within movement and action and activities, as you get people more involved and you build up to it, that's about the comfort level that you've built up to that point. And you speak to the whole room. You know, you're not just speaking to the dancers of the room, you're speaking to the comfort level of the person who can sort of move their fingers. So that's really stood out to me and something I would definitely be applying. Appreciate that.
Appreciate that, Jomar. Thank you so much. And yeah, I would love, now we're going to go back to those reactions. If y'all love that, go ahead and give a heart reaction. Yeah, I appreciate it. You're picking up on the whole thing, is that it's building momentum. Again, a lot of y'all said, hey, we want events where people get a chance to connect to other people and they're excited to come back. Most people want to stay in their comfort zone. So if you make your events comfortable for them to be in, they're like, okay, great, whatever Kemy's doing, I'm going to be there. As long as I can, right? And then when people watch replays, they're like, oh man, I missed that. It's like, yeah, you can't serve everybody all at the same time, but I'm doing my best to make sure the people who are in the room get the most exciting experience. And then those who are, and back to Kari's point about cameras, one of my favorite facilitators, he would do the thing where he would really honor those who are on camera and say, hey, I see Sandy on camera. Thanks for having your camera. I see Joe Mark, and like really give people the shout outs and say, oh, like, thank you for doing the thing that helps me feel connected to you. It's not a requirement, but I really want to appreciate those of you who are on camera. And anybody who's really active in the chat, hey, thank you for being active in the chat, Monica, and making sure that people get acknowledged for the ways that they're showing up. Now, as y'all can see, we have the ticking clock here that we got these last two pieces. And then we'll just have a few minutes for any kind of Q&A. With creativity, as y'all have already got a chance to see, I love making things creative because I want to make it memorable. This is a version when y'all are saying we want people to come back because they're going to remember something. Now, we generally forget about 99% of what we see, but most of y'all might have heard this Maya Angelou quote that says, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you do, but people will never forget the way you made them what? Somebody, Danielle, I saw you moving there. What do you got? Okay. Feel, right? Feel. So let me ask you, if we were to really kind of zone in on one word, what's one word you would want your audience to feel in your presence when they're in the virtual space? What's one word you want your audience to feel in your presence? Let's just focus down on that. You can pop that in the chat. Seen, inspired, powerful, safe, warmed. Yeah, at ease, loved, heard. Yeah. If you focus on that, the technology will fall into place. Sometimes we get so consumed with technology, we forget, oh, how do I want people to feel with me? Please remember that that's what you're getting to. That's what will help make it memorable. And when we start to look at some of the pieces that we can use of having nonverbal feedback, the calls to comment, the energy management, enjoying the process, and permission to personalize. Now, you've already been seeing a chance of this when I'm doing the nonverbal feedback. I'm asking y'all to do the head nods. I'm asking y'all to do the Zoom reactions, things that don't require you to say anything, because we know unmuting is a whole situation in Zoom, right? So all these things that allow people, whatever noises in their background, to still participate. I mentioned this earlier with the chat calls to comment. The more specific you can ask them, the more likely it is, like we just did it right now. What is one word you want people to feel in your Zoom room or in your presence? And y'all were able to, boom, you were able to answer that call to comment. If you leave it too vague, people just don't contribute. I've seen it over and over again. Make your calls to comment very specific, right? I even have people put in hashtags like bigger than bias. So I'll have them put hashtag B, bigger, BT, B, or yeah. You see me trying to remember, but instead of writing bigger than my biases, I'm even trying to remember how those words start. I'll have them put that as a hashtag, or I'll have them, as you all did earlier, put the word compel if you had a talk that's been compelling in your last 90 days. So being intentional with your calls to comment to give folks a chance to participate. So thanks, Lisa. Bigger than my bias is the hashtag BTMB, right? Thanks, Lisa. Energy management. The main energy you have to manage is your own, right? Because you cannot necessarily manage everyone else's energy, but I want to make sure that I'm bringing energy. There are times where I am calmed down. I sit down, I let folks know, yeah, cool, we're chill. This is a chill part of the conversation. We're going to lower the, lower the volume, lower the intensity, but that's me also managing the energy to get a sense of where people are in the room. This crazy thing about the virtual space is that we have to bring more energy than ever before. Bring energy in a way that's authentic to you though, right? I'm wearing sequins. Like some people are like, I'm not gonna wear sequins for a Zoom call. That's my jam. That's my permission to personalize, which is at the bottom. But how do I bring the energy that I want? Most of it is caffeine, but the idea is how do I bring the energy that I want? Because even though you might be thinking about those folks' reactions, sometimes we don't get a chance to see the impact that we're having on folks, but they're paying attention to our energy and how we're guiding them through a process. And then in order to absolutely, in order to have bring the energy, you also have to enjoy your own process. Man, so we're going to talk about this in the confidence section. So I'm going to finish this and we will talk about the confidence section. But I also want to give you permission to personalize. As you see here, I've been using these different slides and these techniques, but the point is, as I said before, I wanted to bring myself online. And the one thing we've told all of our clients as they want to transform into virtual engagement is what is the intention that you want to bring online? And then let's make it your own. Let's make it creative for you so it's actually more sustainable. If you see anyone who's like starts to add this extra persona, it's like, oh, that's not sustainable. Be yourself, make it creative, make it exciting. And there are people who are looking for you. There are people who are looking for exactly the way that you do it. And when you show up that way, like, oh, fantastic, I found my person, I found my leader, I found my coach, I found my trainer. So you give them permission to personalize their learning by giving yourself permission to personalize your presentations. Boom, I got those. Yeah, see, I appreciate what y'all sharing in the chat. I'm going to close this one out because I'm going to transition into creativity or into the portion around confidence, because I think that's going to bring it all together for you all. And most people ask us, hey, how do I become more confident with being online? And it's honestly a hard thing to answer until we take them through all the other 4 of those 5 stars. Because when you have those things in your back pocket, you can be more confident. So for us, confidence is modeling a growth mindset. And we're not about here, fake it till you make it. We're talking about as you make it, enjoy that and let people know where you're at and be confident in that piece. And because you're even seeing me as I stumble a little bit, or that, and most of y'all are like, oh, I didn't even catch that. Yeah, because y'all are having your own experience. As I model a growth mindset, as my slides don't work the right way or the polls don't show up, I'd rather just call it what it is and keep on going. Because again, I'm giving you all, especially in this kind of training, permission to do the same. So with modeling the growth mindset, I always do power prep. So what helps you be in your power as you prep for those presentations? Lift the lid, which I'll talk about in a moment. Focus on serving. I think some of y'all talked about being able to serve in your events. If you focus on the impact you're there to make, the technology kind of filters away, so you can really be that intentional focus. And when you have troubleshooting issues, troubleshoot calmly and then ask for help. In almost every call, there are people who know Zoom maybe better than you, and they can help you if you give them the permission to do so, right? But that's the humbling thing to say, hey, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me, or does anybody know how to do this? So as I kind of walk through the power prep, is I will literally tell you that right behind my screen here, this is my vision board that I have on my wall. I have this one, I have multiple vision boards. I have an emotional cookie jar on my virtual cookie jar in my background, which is like my background screen changes every 30 minutes and shows me like awesome things that I've been a part of or impact that I got to make. So my part of my power prep is having that right there for me to see. So even if I get no virtual engagement, I'm looking at the reminders that I need for what I'm here to do. Right? That helps me stay in my power mode. And generally I'll try to have somebody on the call or like find the people who are rolling with me so I can keep on looking at them. But okay, great. Those folks are rolling with me. Let me not worry about the other people who are not, because at least 20% of people are generally not going to be rolling with me. So I'm like, all right, that's fine. I want to focus on what's going to help me stay in my power. So that's the music I listen to. I was telling Fardos that it gets really hot in this room. So most of the time I'm like wearing shorts and things that allow me to feel like I can be as comfortable as possible. Lift the lid. This comes from John Maxwell that says, as presenters, whatever the environment, we can never expect anyone to come with more enthusiasm, more engagement, more excitement, more interest than we do as a facilitator. So part of lifting the lid, and this is me using a prop, right? We underestimate the use of props. Most of us don't use props. So this is my smile prop to remind people to smile. And then I have this one here to demonstrate lifting the lid, right? If we put the lid and say, this is the only way virtual engagement can happen, then everybody else kind of falls in line with that. If we raise the bar, we literally lift the lid off and say, hey, like a lot more is possible than what I even imagined coming in here. Am I giving people permission to do so, to kind of go further than I'm even understanding right now? But we have to be able to lift that lid. We're the ones as the presenters who said it. So if someone's like, all right, so we're gonna do this Zoom meeting and I know you're all really busy and all right, we're just gonna get through this. That's how I used to do this. And that just already communicates that it's we're rushing versus really focusing on the impact that will drive the engagement that we're seeking. So lift that lid, people. And as we talk about focusing on serving, the reason I was excited to do this presentation is you all have powerful messages to bring to folks. And I think it was Trent Shelton that said, don't worry about your hair. And meanwhile, I'm like, oh, I got to get my dreads nice and tight. Like, don't worry about all that. Just focus on giving people what they need, what you're there to give them, and the rest will fall into place. And I've seen that where even people who still do like 2-hour webinars or Zoom calls with no breaks or anything, people are willing to show up. You don't have to be perfect at this to give people a wonderful experience that's very powerful and allows them to see who you truly are. So I want you to put in the chat, what is one thing that stands out to you from this slide? And the ask for help piece, as I already mentioned earlier, is really being willing to be humble as we troubleshoot. Just know for most of the things that you're experiencing, a lot of people have experienced on Zoom. It's better to call it out and say, hey, I'm not really seeing the chat for some reason. Let me go ahead and restart. Or, hey, for some reason, I'm not seeing you all, or are y'all seeing my screen? Oh, let me restart the screen share. Hey, it's more normal now than it was even at the beginning of last year. And for me, that asking for help, especially as a facilitator, I'm also modeling that it's okay for anybody at any point in the training to ask me for further clarification, for more help. So as I mentioned before, modeling this is more important than all of the trying to make it perfect. And most people have found benefit from me, even when I struggle, how they see me bounce back, because then they're like, okay, cool, I can do something similar. So thank y'all for that. I know we covered quite a bit, and I'm still trying to end right on time. And as a summary here, I'll say that we covered the 5 stars of virtual engagement, or really any engagement, which are connection, communication, collaboration, creativity, and confidence. And as you go about your life moving forward, I will share a couple of things that here's my contact info that you can stay in touch with us. We do have a online course that we created right before. So we actually created this online course, and then the murder of George Floyd happened, and it broke my heart. And I was like, I was talking about virtual engagement. I just need to talk about how to increase equity. Like, that became my main focus. And so many people haven't even seen this online course. We will be willing to offer it to y'all for free for 14 days. So if you're actually into it, you can just send an email to serve@F.E.A.R.S Advantage, and we will send you that link. We don't have like a landing page. It's not a thing that we are actively promoting, but those of you also, if your clients, we do offer it in more of a workshop format to dive a little bit deeper for any of your clients who are, especially those who are in the Pilot network. We want to make sure that every person who has a powerful message, who has that purpose-driven message to serve, can get the tools they need to feel confident bringing that message online. So again, I'll leave my contact info up for those of you who want to email us for that link for the 14-day access to our online course. And you'll see a little bit of baby version of me when I was first getting online, but the same tools will be true, and you'll get a chance to get a little bit deeper context for all the things we covered. And finally, I want to say thank you. I know we're running right up to the clock, and so I will close out intentionally, and I'll stay a little bit after for those who would like to chat some more. The way that I will close out is with one of my favorite closeouts on Zoom. It's called Hey Yo. And the way it works is that we will all together, we'll unmute ourselves in a moment. Let me show you. We'll all together go, hey, yo, and take this positive energy with us by going, all right. So it's going to go, hey, yo, all right. And then we'll take it with us. So we're going to unmute for a moment. It's going to be a little bit chaotic, a little bit whatever. I'll be the only one on camera, so no worries. And that way we'll close out. And anybody who wants to stay for questions, you're welcome to. All right. So let's do this. 1, 2, 3. Hey, yo.
Oh,
Right.
So let us use that to reinforce that we were not perfect on that one, but it doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone.